Hello, everyone. My name is Logan Crow, and I am the executive director and founder of the Frida Cinema. Frida Cinema is a nonprofit art house cinema located in downtown Santa Ana in Orange County. And we are a repertory cinema, very fond of both the horror film genre and LGBT cinema. And so it's been an honor to be invited to moderate today's panel for Dread Central. This is part of Dread Central's Dissecting Horror series. I believe it's their third episode of the series, and it's their Pride Edition series. Happy Pride if you're watching today. And for this Pride Edition, we have four talented LGBTQ plus filmmakers and film artists. With me, I'm going to introduce everyone, and then we're going to get started. Throughout the show, you are welcome to send in your own questions. Just comment with your questions, and we will share them with our panelists so that they can give you some answers. But joining us today, we have Carla Patullo. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Patullo.
Patullo. See, I went all like Italian with it. Carla Patullo, who's an award-winning composer, also known as White Widow, who's created rich and diverse soundscapes for film and television productions that have earned Carla a Daytime Emmy, a BAFTA, an Independent Spirit Award, and the GLAAD Media Award. So that is an awesome little shelf of trophies for you. Well done. That's great. We also have with us Chris Crane, who is a production designer, has been working in film since 2008, has designed a number of high-profile festival films, including the Ricky Tolman direct-feature film Run This Town, which was a South by Southwest 2019 film, Matt Johnson's Operation Avalanche, which hit Sundance in 2016, The Rainbow Kid, which hit Toronto International Film Festival in 2016, and Clara, directed by Akash Sherman, Toronto International Film Festival 2018, for which he was nominated for the DGC Craft Award for Best Production Design. The digital series Cold, which won a Best Drama Award from the Streamy Award, and the Omni Television series Blood and Water, whose most recent feature film, which hit Toronto International Film Festival, and which we actually streamed at the Frida. We'll talk about that. The Disappearance at Clifton Hill. So welcome, Chris. We have John Berardo.
Berardo,
right on. From Norman, Oklahoma, who received his MFA in film and TV production from USC and his BA from UCLA in theater, directing, and playwriting. John co-founded production company Shatterproof Films, which specializes in genre-based films with topical social messages. Very cool. Dembanger, a topical reinvention of the slasher genre for the social media generation, was scheduled to be his debut feature at South by Southwest 2020. And we have Paul Etheredge. Paul is best known as the writer, director, and editor of Hellbent, the first gay slasher film. Also the director producer for two Sony TV productions, the experimental horror web series Buried Alive, and the action noir Angel of Death, which featured stuntwoman Zoe Bell in her first starring role. Etheridge also worked on the queer supernatural soap Dante's Cove for 2 seasons as a writer and lead story editor of season 4. Also the art director for Morgan Freeman's series Through the Wormhole, production designer for Eli Roth's History of Horror. Etheridge will resume writing, directing as soon as this damn coronavirus allows. I hear you, I feel you. I also want to point out Carla is the founder of, or is it, I had it here, is it Trika Studios? Where, yeah, talk to You founded something. Tell us about it.
I have my own studio, I guess. I also made a short film with my partner. It was an animated short film, Trick Studio. Maybe that's
Trick Studio. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there was a weird little glitch in the printing, and I'm like, I don't think Trika is correct, although I don't know. Yeah, it could be named after somebody, but Trick Studios. Okay. Thank you. So welcome everyone. First of all, happy Pride Month. I am honored to have been invited to moderate this, and my assumption is, as John at Dread Central knows, I'm a huge horror junkie as well as a member of the LGBTQ community. The Frida, which is a cinema that I founded, we're very diverse in our programming, but we've definitely identified that we have a following and an audience for both of these genres, particularly horror. Horror continues to be our #1 genre. We've been open for 6 years, and our biggest film to date has been Mandy. which, you know, stuck around for three weeks. We've never run a film for more than 2 weeks, and just was the juggernaut that, you know, took over the cinema. And I think that speaks a lot about who our demographic is and what the interests are of our community. It was not a film that saw a lot of mass media marketing, so much as buzz within our communities of this incredible genre film. Nicolas Cage, the music, the art, you know, the scenery, the whole thing, built it up. I'm also a former board member of our community's Pride, which is Orange County Pride. And I'll communicate that it's been very disappointing and disheartening, obviously, to see Pride events be canceled due to COVID-19. But it's been simultaneously really encouraging to see how many institutions are keeping the idea of Pride Month alive with their own special programming, with marketing, with branding, imagery, to communicate that Pride Month exists beyond just the festivals and the parade, and that it's important that we remember this and celebrate the LGBT community as well as LGBT artists. I definitely want to commend Dread Central for theming this segment to Pride and for recognizing Pride in this fashion. This is a very general question, but it's something I wanted to ask everyone. In your experience, especially seasoned filmmakers, what would you say your experience has been with the horror community at large in terms of its relationship with the LGBTQ community, themes and filmmakers, that conversation at large? And would you say that's changed in any way over the past 5 or 10 years?
Or 15.
Or 15 or 20, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I can speak.
Start with everyone, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak about the reaction to Hellbent, which came out in 2005. And for the most part, horror publications were supportive. And Bloody Disgusting, Fangoria, they all did decent coverage of it and received the film well. You know, there were a few independent, you know, reviewers who, you know, obviously just kind of took a knee-jerk reaction to the subject matter, you know, that it was, you know, queer cinema, and, you know, without even addressing the film, you know, would just pan it, make it a joke. And so that was, you know, it was a middling reaction. It didn't really get a lot of traction as far as, you know, generating other queer horror content for a long time. But now I feel that's very, very different. 2019, 2020, it's like every film that I had any kind of involvement with at the beginning of this year was queer horror or queer TV.
Right on.
Queer horror TV.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but did you premiere the film at the theater that used to be on, I think, Fairfax? It was called the Regent or the Regency.
Yeah. Yeah, the actual premiere was at the Castro in San Francisco.
Okay.
But when it was released, we had, I think, 20 venues across the country. Yeah. And the Regent Theater on Fairfax was owned by the distributor, I believe. I think that's why we were there.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was either opening night or maybe the LA premiere, but I was there. I remember it very fondly because it was a big deal. I was living in LA at the time, and it was a queer horror film, slasher film to boot. So how could I miss that? So I remember it just feeling like a really big deal, and obviously really enjoying it. You know, and you know, having it set at a Pride event, there was a familiarity and a connectivity to it, and I just really had a blast with it. And you're right. I mean, at the time, I just remember the novelty of it. You know, not having recalled. You know, obviously we've had LGBT characters in films and whatnot, but a film that was so directly, you know, comprised of LGBT protagonists and set at an LGBT event. So, so right on. Does anybody else have any feedback on that question about the,
I think that it's changed quite a bit. You know, 2005, I remember 2005 very well. I was, you know, that was when Facebook was big, or Facebook was becoming big. And I think the internet and social media has really given people of, you know, minority communities the ability to show off their art to each other and share it more. And, I think that we are starting to see how the monopoly of viewership is being broken up on the internet, and that's giving people who wouldn't necessarily have a chance, to share their voice, the chance to do that. So I definitely think it's continuing to change, as we speak.
Sure. And did anyone else have an answer to that? You don't have to. Okay.
I have something else to
Jump
add
in.
to
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I warned you.
No, please do.
I also feel that currently, in the last few years, and I'm certainly recognize this in myself, that audiences are tiring of the same kind of film, the same all white voices. And I think that is really propelling the interest in, going to, for audiences to seek out, wildly different voices that we just haven't heard in ever, really. And, luckily queer voices and queer people of color, we're all able to, get interest from people who actually have money because they see this need. So keep plugging.
No, absolutely. And I know that, for example, Midsummer Scream horror convention, I know a friend of mine moderated a LGBT and horror cinema panel, and there was a line around the building to get into that. It was oversold, and it was exciting to see that. It was relegated as, okay, we'll just give them this little panel. It was a big deal. And it was exciting to see the community show up there. What does anyone maybe feel like the future of LGBT horror or LGBT audiences presence or fandom in the horror community, what the future that might look like? Might we see more Scream Kings? Might we see, you go to a horror convention and you've got, sometimes you've got models, scantily clad female models covered in blood that are tied to a specific film handing out merch. But sometimes you've just got scantily clad models in general just handing out merch. When do we see the scantily clad, male models or what do you think that future might look like, and or both from a film level and also from a horror community level?
I think that is just wait for Demi to come out. I'll say that. But I do think that is. I'm so glad you asked that question because the horror, especially slasher genre, has such a history of a misogynistic imagery, if you would. You've got a man with a giant, phallic object chasing a screaming woman who's usually, half naked. And I think that, like Paul said earlier, audiences are tired of seeing that. And we live in a day and age to where you can deconstruct, the old tropes of horror and, modernize them to what we as an audience today want to see. And I think that having, Scream Kings is an LGBTQ theory, in my opinion, because you are taking gender roles and reversing them. And that, for the slasher genre to continue and not be recycling stuff that we've seen over and over again, you must be able to do that. Now, horror, much like a lot of other camp, genres, they recycle certain things, and that's what elevates them. If you can take elements of an old horror movie and bring it to a new idea, it's going to make it that much better because we're all such fans of the classics. And when you can reference those and put a new spin on it, Scream Kings is the perfect example of that. And I think we will totally see more and more of that.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. We've got this new documentary, obviously, about Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, which if all of you hopefully have seen it, if not, check it out. But I was glad that its existence, in the sense that I remember when that movie came out, I was way too young to draw the direct parallel, but I think I was seeing it, in whatever conscious level my 10-year-old self was seeing it. And certainly it revisits, it's all there as I grew older. But obviously even that, depending on who you talk to, was either really under the radar or in your face. It's never named, but
gay, if you're queer, it's in your face.
Yeah, sure.
There's the surface level of the film, and
Right.
that, if you're not responsive to that coding that's within the film, you find a simple way to kind of, it's like, oh, Freddy's just being a badass, popping out at people,
Right.
But, if you're queer and this is, these are the moments that you live, then definitely you're seeing an entirely different film. There's another film, another film called Brain Damage, which came out in '88, which is even more intentionally queer. And I recommend people checking it out.
I haven't seen that in a long, long time. I don't think I made that
Yeah.
parallel, but yeah. We have an
Yes.
audience question. Besides seeing them, how can we support your films? I'd love to do more, but I don't know the best step. It's a very good question in terms of just in general. How do y'all build communities around your particular projects? I guess is a good way to connect. Carla?
Okay.
I'm gonna pick you up by name.
Well, being the composer, I don't really, see it from the angle of the filmmakers here, but, as far as, supporting the film, I would say, and of course we're in kind of a weird state with there not being cinemas or people being able to go out to theaters and also support the local theaters. But as a composer, I am hoping to release this as a soundtrack. So that usually ends up helping me kind of stay afloat as a composer. And I think, just the film, supporting the film, I guess, and any, helping keep the filmmaker's career going. It does come down to, tickets and stuff like that. But I don't know. I bet the filmmakers here have a better view of that.
I'd say it's really just a matter of creating awareness and using your voice and your platform as an artist to let people know and see your art. And I think that social media has been proven to be a great tool for that for a lot of people. And nowadays you can go on Netflix and you can just add something you saw to your Instagram story. If you like content or anything, share it with your friends, tell people about it. Like I do that. And I think that that's the power of cinema, is it gives us the ability to share and stir up conversation, create call to action. Like that's what film should do. And so, the internet and film, we're in a day and age to where we aren't going to cinemas, but that doesn't mean that we can't still enjoy the power of story and, especially horror and what it can do for us. So, yeah, I mean, the internet's just the best place to get your presence known.
Yeah.
Chris?
I think, COVID obviously has a lot of downsides, but for me, a few films that came out, including Disappearance of Clifton Hill, came out right before this happened. So they were able to get them on demand a lot sooner for people to be able to download. And because people are kind of, going through content so quickly, I've been able to sort of, be like, hey, check out this film I did, and, support something from Canada or support something, with actors in it that you like. So I've actually found a lot more people have been open to watching things that, maybe they wouldn't have made the effort to go to the cinema to see. And I've been, all the way through promoting if it was in a festival, when it's come out, like if it's had been in a news article. So yeah, I do think it's a weird opportunistic time to sort of, promote things that you've worked on right now.
Absolutely. Paul?
Yeah, the same. Amplify, your interest. If you find a queer film that you are enjoying, broadcast it. And, seek out the films that, you can, I don't know where Hellbent's playing right now, honestly. But I wouldn't recommend buying the disc right now. It's not a very good transfer. That's supposed to be remedied this year. We'll see. But yeah, the internet, exactly what John was saying. You guys are probably more plugged into that world than I am right now. So you've got fresh stuff.
Cool. And on that note, we have an audience comment. Major props to Paul. Hellbent was the first film I felt confident to take my straight friends who are horror fans. One is a writer, one is a director of indie horror films, and we all had a blast. So awesome. Very cool.
Thank you.
Building connections. I love it. That's great. And tied to that, obviously, as a person who obviously values the role of art house cinemas in terms of giving a platform and screens to smaller independent horror genre films, and we do that regularly at the cinema. And as a matter of fact, we played Disappearance at Clifton Hill, and then quickly switched gears and started to do the streaming where we had porno. So I'm wondering, how, from a personal level, how important is it to you individually in this day and age where streaming is so prolific, how important is you as individuals to have your films have an opportunity to play at a theater on a big screen? And right now, were there any films that you were working on that were intended for theatrical releases that have gone, that are probably going to be going to streaming?
For me, it's very important. I obviously don't expect something to play for like, multiple months in a row, but just to have something I've worked on be able to be in a theater anywhere, and for me to be able to promote it and tell people to go see it. Like I was lucky enough, like I live in Hamilton, which is just outside of Toronto, and Clifton Hill actually went to a local small renovated theater here. So I got to go with my boyfriend and his dad to go see it. So for me, that's great. I do like that things get on demand because, again, a lot of people just don't like to go to the theater unless it's like an event movie, like a Marvel movie or something like that. So I'm happy for things to stream. For me, it's like any way someone can see something that I've worked on or something that I've enjoyed, like I'm happy to do it. But yeah, it's great to at least at the beginning be able to see it on the big screen.
Sure. And I've been asking this question to filmmakers because for me, it's something I say often. I think every film deserves to be seen on a big screen. And sometimes we'll play, even if it means we played a movie once because we're able to sneak it in or to schedule, that is very important to me. But as I've talked to more and more filmmakers, I have had a few say, I just want it to be seen. And so, which I totally understand. So I think that the streaming option, it's something we've talked about internally. Obviously, we didn't adopt it until COVID hit and all the different micro studios started to put their films out in this platform. We've discussed keeping that going even after we reopen. We've only got 2 screens or maybe films that we can't fit into our schedule, but we could at the very least say it's playing on our virtual cinema, that sort of thing. Just curious to know what folks think about that from an artist perspective.
It's me. Sorry. I think it's great. It essentially gives you more screens than what you've got.
Correct.
And I have become members of a number of small theaters around the country, specifically to see what they're programming, because I don't get the chance to do film festivals often. And, frequently that's the only time that you get to do it.
Right.
So I'm really excited about horror film festivals being online this year because I can actually see the shorts programs. I can see a lot of these films that usually I'm working through them, and and then I forget about them, and some things don't get released.
Yeah, I'm proud of how the art house community innovated very quickly. We adapted extremely quickly because it wasn't just us as theaters; it was also the distributors. I think it was probably a big challenge, a big move to suddenly go from a legacy of we don't want our film streaming in any way, shape, or form for piracy issues and whatnot, to just adopting it very quickly. Some of them immediately, and then others took their time a little bit, but it really has allowed us to keep our mission going and to keep these film scenes and to give a platform for porno and genre films. And with porno specifically, it was really exciting because even though we play a lot of horror, at that time, the pickings for horror films in our virtual screening room were non-existent. It started with more of your highbrow films, which we also play. So it was exciting to be able to slot one in, and now we've got more and more. Carla, I have a question for you. I'm reading that Skywalker Sound and the Sundance Institute selected you as a composer fellow for 2019 Sundance Film Festival and Sound Design Lab, which is awesome. And it was there that you developed your haunting and vocally driven score to Porno. Can you talk a little bit about, and actually it's a question from the audience too, how would you describe your score for Porno? And can you talk to us a little bit about that journey, creating the score with the Sundance Institute, or however that connection happened, all the way to release?
Yeah, so the sound to the score is, it really plays off of the succubus in the film. And my primary instrument is singing. So it was really fun because I got into all this siren singing, and the succubus in the film doesn't really speak. So through my vocals and through the music, I really got to kind of get into that character's headspace. So it was pretty much of a dream score for me because, I could really just have a lot of fun with it. And so, we were just kind of, I would say it's like a blind date, Keola and I, they just kind of said, "Hey, you got into the lab," and I'm like all excited, telling my dad, like, like, "Well, the film you're scoring is called porno." It's like, oh God, like what, like, okay. And but when I saw it, I thought it was hilarious, and I totally get. I used to perform with Sandra Bernhard, so I used to be in the comedy world. I love comedy. So I kind of got, and in my band it's like White Widow, so it was really like this a perfect match, and yeah, so we went to Skywalker, and we just got to experiment. We had a really fun sound designer from there that we got hooked up with, and we just the bummer is, like, you record there, you don't get to keep the recording because of it's like all union musicians and stuff, but that meant we could just kind of tear it up and have fun with it. And, really, like, we did all sorts of funny things. Like, yeah. So it was a great experience.
It's a great title too. And it allowed us to have that moment where we had to send a newsletter out saying, now opening at the Frida, porno and Hail Satan. Yeah. So that was fun. I'm sure we turned some eyes there in the heart of Orange County, California. No, it's a great film, and it's funny going back to what somebody said. Forgive me, about turning conventions on their head. There's a moment in porno where towards maybe the end, where the young man in the film has a very he's shirtless, he's taking off his clothes, and he's in the smoke, and it's very erotically shot. And I'm watching this, and I'm going, like, 25 years ago, that wouldn't have been a guy.
Right.
So this is that moment in the film, and it is the steamy Kelly LeBrock, whatever you want to call it, moment. Yeah. And it's a guy, and I, those moments, they're not lost on me. And I think that that's important. And I think that it's great to see more and more of that. The reference is clearly there. And that's fantastic. I have a question that actually ties into a question I had. So it's a two-part question. I'd love to hear an answer from all of you. My question is there a horror film that inspired you to take on horror as a genre in your own craft? And second to that is there an LGBT writer or director that maybe inspired you to add your voice in cinema, and or whose work you admire? Let's start with John.
Hands down, my favorite horror movie is Scream. I actually have a tattoo of it on my arm right here. See that?
Oh, right on, yeah.
Yeah. I saw that movie when I was a kid, and it scared the living hell out of me. And it was funny. It was fun. It was like a roller coaster ride. And I couldn't sleep for like days. And so I talked to my grandma into buying it behind my parents' back. And I made my little brother watch. I made everybody watch it, and watched it so many times. And I became so obsessed with it. And I was like, I want to do this. I want to make this. I want to be the person that can do this. And that was really at the start of it. I was lucky to be very young, and be able to know that about myself. And Scream, it was just the movie of the 90s, in my opinion. And it epitomized culture in a way, but with the references, history, and slasher genre. And that being said, Kevin Williamson, he's an LGBT writer and director, and he's obviously a huge inspiration for me, especially when I was a kid. And I would say more recently, I'm a huge fan of Chris Landon. His work is really great, and I love his movies. And he's a great writer. So, yeah, Scream.
Right on. It's a good one. I remember when that came out too, going to see it because the ads were really selling it as a comedy. And that it was, and just the trailer sort of suggesting it's a self-referential comedy. I was in. I don't think they could market just how scary it would end up being. And I just remember being really scared throughout the movie and being surprised to be scared because what I was expecting was a full-on comedy. So just so effective on both levels. I agree. Great film.
I was so pissed when I saw Scream because of that. It's like, I do not like slashers.
Oh, is that right? So
yeah. No.
Got the better of you?
Yeah, I mean, my friends were like, no, it's, reinventing the slasher. It's funny. Look, it's Drew. I walked in, I was so pissed. But now I'm a little better with it.
Paul, what would be yours?
my mother taught film, so I can't even remember the first horror film I saw. I was teased on it. You know, I think that the first film that sci-fi horror film that I remember making an impression on me was the original Invaders from Mars. And it's heavy production design as well. And that's always been, you know, a huge part of my life. I've been an artist since I was 2 years old. My family's artists. So that's from, you know, decades ago. I can't imagine many people today, new filmmakers, saying, you know, pointing to that and saying, "Oh, that was awesome." As far as, you know, queer filmmakers, you know, when I was growing up, there weren't many. I mean, Clive Barker is really the only one I can think of right now. Yeah. And you know, his particular taste didn't always align with mine, although I saw all of his movies. I mean, I can't think of one who inspired me to, you know, become a filmmaker. Because I mean, I was a kid when I wanted to be a filmmaker too, when I was like 8 years old or younger.
Right on.
But I'm glad that there are more now to choose from. Say that.
Oh, for sure. No, Clyde's great. Nightbreed is just about as
Yes.
clear as one could get. I just adore that movie. Chris?
I not to copy answers, but Scream was the first like proper horror movie I saw. Like as a little kid, my sister, you know, to torture me, I think I watched Poltergeist 3, which scared the crap out of me. But I had no interest in horror. You know, I read Goosebumps or Christopher Pike, but the Scream movie came out. Everyone was talking about it. I think I was in grade 8 or grade 9, and so I rented it and watched it in the day with something in my eye and enjoyed it. And then wanting to know all the references. Like I'd never seen Halloween. You know, I'd never seen any of the Nightmare on Elm Streets. You know, I'd caught obviously like Jaws as a kid and Piranha and, you know, the fun kind of ones with stuff edited out, like Funhouse I saw a lot as a kid with a lot of the gore taken out of it.
Right.
That really inspired me to start to want to like watch slashers and delve into slashers. And, you know, this is the Blockbuster era. So I'm like, you know, going through Blockbuster and like grabbing, you know, every Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, and then trying to find, you know, like House on Sorority Row. And as I got older, I ended up getting, there was some weird liquidation sale and they had all these old VHS from the East Coast. So I got like House on Sorority Row and I got The Mutilator and just a whole bunch of ones that now, you know, you can buy very easily. Some of them are on Shudder, but as a kid, these were like gold. So, and then for queer cinema, it was more like, I think, you know, I didn't come to terms with my sexuality until I was probably about 2021. So movies like But I'm a Cheerleader, Hellbent, you know, just anything I could kind of sneak in with some friends that weren't aware, you know, I could kind of get away with. The Fluffer was one I kind of was like, this is a drama, right? You know, it was just, yeah, so just trying to get, and for me, that was really, it was great because it was stuff that could pass with some of my friends that would maybe question things because they were still entertaining, but I got to see, you know, representation of something that, you know, was me essentially. So, so yeah, so that's sort of those intersecting fields.
Sure. And isn't it fun too when you've seen a movie a million times on TV and you think you've seen it and then you finally watch it on tape and you're like, oh my God, like what is she doing with that crucifix or whatever it is, like some scene that didn't make it into the televised.
I think it's like lots of dead, you know, when she's ripped up from the creature and I was like, I didn't know that shot was in there. I thought everything was fine after.
Totally blocked that out. Carla?
I would say The Shining, Wendy Carlos' score, you know, it's pretty cool. And yeah, and maybe like The Curse of Chucky.
Really? I'll tell Donnie. He'll appreciate that.
Somebody, I've been saying for a while, somebody needs to make the Wendy Carlos documentary. Like how that film doesn't exist, I don't know, but that would just be incredible. Which Chucky?
The Curse of Chucky.
The Curse of Chucky. I think I have to catch up with that one. I'm not sure I've seen that one. Right on. And would Wendy Carlos be also your second answer to that for LGBT?
Yeah, Wendy Carlos. There's, you know, I can say a couple other LGBT, but not in the horror genre exclusively. But some of my favorite composers: Leslie Barber, Laura Cartman, just all women in the LGBTQ community doing great work that I admire.
Right. We have a question from the audience. Do you think that body horror could be a way to convey the feelings of unease and wrongness that dysphoria brings? I've been thinking about this for a while, but not sure how to wholly go about it. And interestingly, tied to that, I did have a question. that's sort of tied to that, which is, do you have any thoughts about the intersection between sex and sexuality and the aesthetics and thrill of a good horror film?
Absolutely, yeah. I think sexuality is a huge part of of the subgenre of slasher. Even, I mean, horror in general, because there's the fear of the unknown, and we are living in a day and age to where things are progressing for the LGBTQ community, but we all know what it's like to live that fear of unknown and being the other. And I think that that psychology is something that obviously is in horror films, and it has to do with sexuality. And like I said earlier, in terms of body horror, obviously showing bodies being vulnerable and chopped up, or whatever, is something that people like to see, and it's obviously something that sells. And I think that you can definitely, it's not going to go away. No one's going to say they don't want to see bodies anymore, but you can maybe show them some different types of bodies, or show it in a different way, to say something different.
Right. Any other thoughts on this? Like, I just saw a really, really good. Is anyone familiar with a horror film called What Keeps You Alive? It's an amazing film, and the protagonist is part of a lesbian couple, and I don't want to say too much because it's one of those movies you just have to kind of throw in and watch. But it was, I'm watching one of these, top 10 films that's streaming that you've never heard of type lists, and it popped up on a couple, and so I'm like, I'm gonna check it out. So it was on Amazon or whatnot. Great film. I can't say enough about it. What Keeps You Alive? Really, really intense horror suspense film with a twist. But another one that was very, very brutal physically, but its brutality, it's that is inflicted upon a female by another female, by her. Again, no spoilers, but but it was I had an interesting experience watching it, because it was a dynamic I'd never seen before, in terms of who the players were. And yeah, I don't know that I was able to draw any conclusions from that so much as it had me thinking, because it was an interesting dynamic to not have experienced before. What about that specific question about body horror in general, in terms of how it may communicate? And I don't know if the question is meant from a defensive standpoint of body horror, because I know body horror gets a bad rap sometimes, or they call it torture porn or whatnot, but maybe, I guess that's the question, is there an artistry that can be defended when it's done in a certain way? Or maybe, are there any body horror films that you admire because of maybe some themes or the way that they've been delivered?
Well, I'm a huge Cronenberg fan, so
Right on.
he's king of body horror there. I don't equate the torture porn with body horror.
Right
I
on.
think they're two different.
I agree.
Yeah.
I see them lumped in together here and there, and it confuses me, because body horror can be, not to say that torture porn is a bad thing, but it's, to me, I agree that they're two very different things, because there's not necessarily an element of infliction when it's body horror.
Yeah.
But
one feels like it's you are horrified by yourself, body horror, and the other one is what kind of horrific things can you do to someone else?
Exactly. I think what it comes down to is people just see graphic and throw it all into one category. Yeah. Anyone else have specifically a body horror film that you admire, or that was provocative, or had you sort of looking at the film in a different way?
I guess for me would be probably Reanimator. Like, again, I saw it in high school, and it was on the Scream channel. I don't know if you guys had that in the States, but that was our horror channel. And it was something at the time I never would have rented. I was really into slashers, but it was just the things, the where it was willing to go with things, and with its scientific aspects and its kind of magical aspects and its grotesque aspects, I found it very fascinating. And I found a lot of things revolting in it, but I was very interested in it. Kind of like a lot of Cronenberg stuff. It's can be quite disgusting, but it's like I personally don't like torture porn stuff. I don't find that scary to watch someone slowly get mutilated. That's just me personally.
Sure.
I get the rush of it, and it's horrific, but I would be more into body horror and sort of the unknown of that I find more interesting and more scary.
Absolutely. Right on. As a I know I always pay attention to gay characters in films and TV, especially when I was younger, and it was just more surprising and rewarding to see a Willow on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, for example, which was such a big deal to me. Jesse and everyone else too. Were there any gay characters in horror cinema, or for that matter, cinema at large, that stood out to you as you maybe at any point in your film going life? Whether it was when you were younger or recently, just any sort of LGBT characters that you felt made a mark or.
For me, during the early 80s, Stephen Frears had a number of films that came out. My Beautiful Laundrette. I was in high school when that came out, and that was pretty amazing to watch. It wasn't horror at all. Right. But Paul Verhoeven had a film called The Fourth Man, which made a huge impact on me, and that was a horror film. Sure. Yep. Yeah, that was fucking fantastic.
And did Frears do Prick Up Your Ears as well?
Yes.
Yes, that's another one. Yeah, no, absolutely. Two great films that were pretty early. Anyone else on that one? Characters that stood out or made an impact?
Like nowadays, you see it more on TV. You see like horror television, like like 13 Reasons Why or Teen Wolf, and you see a lot more of that on television because I feel like younger people who are the ones that I think that's really steered for those types of shows. They need to see that content, and I think that you see a lot of like Brandon Flynn on 13 Reasons Why. I mean, this last season gave like a phenomenal performance that I've never seen on that show. And I think that, to have actors portray LGBTQ characters in that sort of, Angels in America type of, reality is something that I think, movies need more of.
No, absolutely.
I was just going to add maybe Killing Eve. Yeah.
Well, we've come a long way too. I remember, I forget where I was watching or something or other, Making Love, which came out in the early 80s, Harry Hamlin film. And Harry Hamlin at that point, had done Clash of the Titans, and he was huge, and eventually ended up on LA Law. But there's a big idea that his performance in Making Love is what cost him his huge film career. People just couldn't handle it. I remember where Christopher Reeve in Death Trap kissed Michael Caine, and it was such a huge deal. Flash forward to today, and you've got Brokeback Mountain, and Heath Ledger goes from that to making one of the biggest films of all time, winning an Oscar. So, that sort of shift is not lost on me, and it's something that younger generations just sometimes, I feel, as I'm talking to people at the theater, they just don't quite get, and it's kind of awesome that it's sort of commonplace for them, and that they don't see the progression, that they're just sort of like, well, this is life. What are you talking about? No one cares about this, but I find that it's important for me to say, yes, it took a lot of, of advocacy, and it took a lot of representation to get there. Partly because I think that representation needs to be consistent and is important. So, going back to TV, you're right. I mean, right now, Teen Wolf, just a lot of shows. I think the Archie show, forgive me, Riverdale.
Yeah.
Riverdale. Yeah, and honestly, I remember Willow on Buffy just being this huge new thing in terms of just how big Buffy was. So, it's been an important growth in that regard. We have a couple more questions. I'm wondering about the horror community at large. So I love horror conventions. I love the horror world. Like I said, I went to see Hellbent when I was younger. Try to catch as many independent horror films, and all the way up to I do not knock studio horror films. I just love horror, but I also love that there's a community around this, and I love that. And this, you go to a horror convention, it is packed. It's also very interesting to me just how interconnected circles are, where you're like, oh my God, so-and-so, and it's just like this family. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about what is it about horror that draws that sort of loyalty and fandom and connectivity? What is it about that genre specifically that calls out that loyalty and that sort of community spirit, in your opinion?
For my opinion, I just think, again, growing up loving slasher movies, most of my friends didn't, you know what I mean? Horror tends to be something that mainstream people tend to not love. So when you find you love Halloween 5 more than, the next, it's when you like even within that, the oddities of the series of movies or types of movies, when you find people that enjoy those as well, or you can have a conversation about them. Like, I know way too much about like the names of all the people and all the Friday 13s and how they all died, and used to like think about like which order they were, and who was the first ethnic person to die, and blah blah blah. So I think it's just having people that relate to that and find that really fascinating and interesting, when most people, in my life anyway, it's not something they're into. It's something I kind of reveal to people or like show them, like a certain horror movie I love, or like my boyfriend got into, rewatching all the Friday the 13th, and then we just went on a slasher binge, and I found some slashers like I had never seen, like Dead Kids or things like that. So yeah, I just think it's sort of it's like a secret. It almost feels like a secret club. It's really cool that conventions have grown and horror has become something that's like seen as more of a positive thing and not as a murdering young women or that kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know. It just feels like it always had a community aspect. And it's like you kind of said before, it's like I always felt like the other, and in watching these, I kind of felt like even liking them, I was still the other. So it was nice to find other people that were into it.
Yeah, I wonder too. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that the other beautiful thing about horror is that when you go to a horror movie, you hear the girl next to you scream, you hear the woman in front of you jump. Like it's a communal experience, like a comedy. And so that's why I think horror is one of those genres that will continue to survive the theater, what's going on. And it's just an experience together. And that experience is what brings us together, when we watch a horror movie.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right on. So we're cutting close to the end. So I would just love to hear what everyone's working on. What is next for you? And I would imagine, obviously, some projects right now have been delayed. But it's been interesting to me to find, when I say, what are you working on? What are you working on personally? Maybe your project stopped, but you've taken on a project maybe that you have been wanting to do for a while, something personal. You picked up the ukulele, which I did. I bring that up, to fill your time, to keep your creative juices flowing. Because if anything, being a creative person who has to stop creating is death. So I would imagine if everyone is anything like me, your brains have been bubbling and you're finding avenues to create. So I'm just wondering what everyone's working on. And I'll go one by one. Carla, what are you working on?
I'm working on an album called Ignition, and it's by an artist named Hunter Wayne, and it's basically a meditation album that horror, like the way he was describing this to me, is that horror actors use this form of meditation to get them in the zone of acting like serial killers on in movies, and so it's been a real fun project because it kind of went away for a little bit, and since a lot of films are down right now, I've been getting back into it and been really loving it. Richard Brake, I don't know if you guys are familiar with his work, but he is doing the voiceover for it, and it's just been a lot of fun. I'm really lucky.
And where can somebody follow you to keep up on the project and learn more?
I guess I post everything on my website, which is just carlapatullo.com. And I like to post about everything, like all my projects there and stuff. Yeah.
Just first name, last name.com, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I believe your name is on screen. So just add a .com to that, folks. Take the space out and keep up with Carla. Chris?
Well, I took this time to do some professional development. So I revamped my website. I updated my reel, which is things I had been meaning to do for a couple years. I ended up getting new agent representation over this time. And then I have a stack of books that I never read from a couple years ago. So just been plowing through actor biographies and female comedian biographies and historical books. Like I'm in the middle of Hidden Figures now, on some audiobooks like Seduction, which is all about, the Howard Hughes Hollywood. So just kind of, doing some work type stuff and then just doing some kind of fun, like educational entertainment.
Excellent. Where can people follow up with you and catch up with you?
Well, I have my Instagram, Chris Crane Could, and then my website is Chris Crane Portfolio.
Chris Crane Could, COULD?
COULD.
Got it. Okay. Because you could. All right. John?
I am, well, we just, we're supposed to have our movie premiere. And so we have been going through the phases of, trying to get the movie out there, and, some fun, exciting things are going to come later. And so in the meantime, when that happens, of course, it's extremely devastating for the entire cast and crew. I mean, the whole world. And so, I'm the kind of person that believes that when we go through times like this, I love to do art and I love to create. And because, it's like you've got the marches and you've got, you just had COVID, and we live in a time to where it's like all this stuff's happening, and media, especially horror, is a great avenue for us to take these stories and messages and put them into something that everybody can understand, because not everybody's understanding why we're marching. So if we can make movies like Get Out or something like that tell us those types of things, that's what horror has the ability to do, that more so than any other genre, in my opinion. And so I'm going to continue preaching that, and trying to make movies that make a difference. So
Very cool.
And going to the protest marches and trying to be creative.
Cool. Be safe out there. I will say that I don't know about you, but I saw, and it was great to see, an incredible amount of empathy. I want to say South by Southwest was one of the first to announce that they had to postpone, and then obviously it's just been a domino since then. But an incredible amount of empathy online for artists and filmmakers whose films were going to premiere that weren't able to have that opportunity. And it was great to see, just from every corner, people expressing their empathy for filmmakers. So I express mine. I hope that you're able to eventually get your film out in festivals.
It'll come out.
Yeah, it'll come out. We're all waiting for that return to normalcy. And I know you're not alone, but where can people keep up with you?
My Instagram, just my name, John Berardo, at John Berardo. It's on Instagram. So.
Very cool. And Paul.
Well, things were put on hold. Things I can't talk about. So what I've been doing, I've been writing, short for a horror anthology, and some queer horror feature material, and some other stuff that isn't queer. I've been making protest signs. I've been doing some sculpting. A friend of mine has a huge Halloween bash every year, so I've been sculpting some things to add to his collection. Just trying to keep sane.
Right on.
Yep.
And people can follow you. Where can people learn about you and follow up with you?
Yeah, Instagram is the best place. I am Doghead Dog, all one word. Oh, I'm also art directing a Tina Turner movie right now.
Oh.
So I forgot about that.
A movie with Tina Turner, or a movie about Tina Turner, or both?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay. Right on.
Yeah.
Very.
It hasn't started yet. That's why I forgot.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So dog. What was it again? Dog.
Dog. D-O-G. Head. H-E-A-D.
Dog.
D-O-G.
Wonderful. Well, everyone, it's been
out the curtains and barks. That's what it is.
Got it. Everyone, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you again, Dread Central, for having us on. And again, I just want to say it is so incredibly awesome. And I think that it's important to point out the awesomeness of recognizing Pride in this fashion, of pulling this group together. These gestures are incredibly important, especially, like I said, right now when the larger festivals and parades are not happening. It means a lot to see organizations like Red Central, allies, step up to keep the theme of Pride alive and to keep the conversation alive, and to give LGBT artists a spotlight to talk about what they're working on and their passions. So it's been a pleasure talking to all of you, and be well, stay safe out there. And here's looking forward to screening your films at the Frida. Got at least a couple of you down, got a couple of you left to go. And, take care. Thanks very much. Be safe out there.
Thank you.
Please be safe out there.